One. Good morning. This is Animal on Control. Welcome to the voice chat. These calls are pre-recording for uploading to social media, and by joining a call, you're consenting to being recorded. Anyone wishing to join a call should email me at animaloncontrol@gmail.com, and I will reply with instructions. Today's topics: rescue dogs, dog haters of antiquity, criminal mutt maniacs, and if we have time, we'll do some ADEP bashing. One thing I wanted to say before we even get the ball rolling is that, I've been communicating with, Ariel and a few other folks in the background about getting the ball rolling on this .org that's going to, lobby against the mutt cult. Thing is, something like that needs manpower. So like initially, we're going to need some folks to, donate maybe a few hours a week of their time or a little bit of money to get it set up. Now, once it's fully stood up, there, may be even some paid opportunities here. One thing is that there's economic advantages on our side of this issue also. So really, I'm reaching out to everyone, but I think particularly anyone with a legal background. If you're say a civil trial attorney, that would be great, or even a legal aid or a paralegal would be good also. Particularly even if we're just talking about this, in the abstract, it's always good to have some, legal advice and the like. And, to those people, there's economic opportunities for all kinds of people here potentially. Although I don't think that those opportunities may not present themselves for a while. But you know what? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, correct? So anyway, joining me is Rodney. Welcome back.
Nice to be here.
Yep. Okay. So I wanted to, I'd invited Sheepie to the call because, interestingly, on her channel, she's reposted some recordings. Actually, I was on one of them because we'd actually just. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to look into search and rescue dogs. It was interesting. I had an exchange on the Reddits a few weeks ago, and I can't find it. I was trying to find it so I could show it. And, whenever you're critical of dogs in society, they bring up service dogs, police dogs, and search and rescue dogs. And I said something critical of that. I said, I don't think these things are really worth the trouble, similar to police dogs and service dogs. And this one, is a dog nut, completely lost it. They went, they flew into this foaming at the mouth, rage monster routine. And they're like, if you're buried in an avalanche, you'll be begging for that dog. It's like, well, if I'm buried in an avalanche, I probably won't be begging for anything. But so I wanted to look into that. And I wanted to cover one case in particular because I believe that search and rescue dogs, like most other working dogs, are a scam. I want to give a shout out to, I believe it was Sonia, who was, I don't know if it was on one of these calls or maybe in a private communication, but she made the point that police dogs were, for the most part, a performative stunt. They're not really all that useful. They're just brought in to either make the police department look good or the dog look good. I would even say it's a propaganda stunt. They're like, Fido's on the job. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about something. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, I want to look at handler. Yeah, I want to look at this. Let me share this. I'm probably going to have to do some editing on here because he got all these long pauses. This is a really interesting case. And this was something that came up about 3 years ago. And I was on hiatus from this at the time. I wasn't doing any dog blogging or vlogging or anything like that. But And probably most folks are familiar with this situation generally. It was back in about 3 years ago. It was the summer of 2021. A condo tower in Surfside, Florida, spontaneously collapsed, or at least partially collapsed. The building was sort of L-shaped, and one arm of the L just fell in a heap at about 1:30 in the morning. And it was due to a variety of factors, I believe. The building, it was below spec, it was poorly maintained, and it was overburdened in various ways. And finally, it just gave out. And I forget the death toll, but it was probably close to 100. But where that's relevant to this space is who comes in to save the day?
Hello.
Well, it's Fido and Rover, the search and rescue dogs. Now, what's interesting about this is, again, this is a steel reinforced concrete structure that just pancaked. And which makes me wonder, see, if you look at this photo in the background, see this rubble pile here? That's what's left of it. And they're saying they have some cranes in the background, to hoist, this large chunks of rubble off the pile. So supposedly search and rescue dogs were brought in to, quote, find people. But I don't know, does it take a rocket scientist to think, okay, well, anybody that was in this part of the building at the time is in the rubble pile? Yeah, Sheepie's having some mic trouble. So maybe hold on, I'll edit this out. Let me reply to her real quick. When you can join. Yeah, because I wanted to talk to her about this because she had some interesting insight and information to this kind of thing. So they brought these dogs in supposedly to rescue people, similar to that Assblasting reply I received. Said, oh, yeah, if you were there, you'd want a dog to save you. It's like, save me how? What is a dog going to do in a situation like this? I mean, seriously.
It's one of maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but my mind always goes to, I want to look at the contracts. I want to see how much the service dog handlers are being paid when they respond to an incident like this.
Yep.
Stuff like that, because like what's guaranteed in the contract? What are they really trying to, I guess, put their neck on the line for, right?
Right. What are they trying to accomplish? Yeah, because, well, it's interesting. Yeah, because that's a really interesting point, is that it's really throughout the whole sort of working dog universe is there's never any warranty or any sort of guarantee of results.
Guys, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Hey,
okay.
How you doing? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I switched to a different headphones.
Okay.
So the nice ones I got.
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear too. So I think we should have a pretty good result. Yeah, it was just starting to deconstructing search and rescue dogs. And I wanted to cover this situation because there's something else I'd taken an interest in. This was that condo tower collapse in South Florida a few years ago. And there was a lot of articles like this. But it's sort of like, this seems like this is primarily a propaganda stunt, right? And like Rodney was saying, it's like there's never any warranty or guarantee of results given. It's just a lot of hype, right?
It seems to me like it's like ass covering. Like if you're the sheriff or whoever's responsible for the agency that has to respond to that, there's going to be criticism flying after the fact and probably lawsuits based on how you responded. So it's are you just bringing them in to show that you made every effort and tried everything that you could do to save as many lives as possible? And this is just, again, like you said, a performative thing. And then from the contractual piece, how much do these people get paid to bring the service dog out? Because if there's like a kind of a money-making scheme around it, that kind of could explain a lot of why people use service dogs so much. I'm not saying it's like a
Well, I think these are, not to nitpick, these are
Yeah.
search and rescue dogs. So,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like, I'm not saying that there's like a multi-billion-dollar rescue dog cabal out there, but I do wonder about like, hey, what is the money changing hands? Is it political like ass covering to say, look, we did everything, you know, like how much of this is actually based in science and results and right, like, hey, how effective is it versus is it just kind of, you know, behind the scenes ass covering and passing money around?
Yeah, that's a pass. And it's also, again, it's an attempt to, many of the people who pursue these activities are, mutt worshippers. They're dog religionists, and they believe the dog is like a magic talisman. It's almost like, remember the old divining rods where they'd
That's
walk
exactly
around with
what
a
it is.
stick, and if the stick pointed at the ground, there was like water underground. But part of that is that, I mean, well, actually, there's probably groundwater pretty much anywhere. I guess if you dig deep enough, right, you're probably going to hit the water table at some point. So what is this stick really doing? It's like, it's not, correlation is not causation. And I bet that's what you see here. The dog is sniffing around and they're like, yeah, the dog reacts to something like, yeah, he found somebody. It's like, yeah, no, duh. There's probably close to 100 people buried in this rubble pile. Moreover, these dogs are trained using food. So you've also got basically the decomposing remains of, 100 or so smashed refrigerators, right? So there's like all kinds of good stuff in there that the dog. So is a dog responding to a live person? Is it responding to a dead person? Is it responding to some leftover Chinese food? Like, who knows, right? It's just responding to something. It can't say, oh yeah, that's like Susan Baker from 3C and she's still alive. Yeah, they're not doing that. They're not
Or like
doing
you could
And if you
randomly
recall-
point to a giant ass pile of rubble and say, oh well, there's probably people under that where the bedrooms used to be. Like how much more effective is the dog going to be than that?
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
Right.
Sheepie, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, like, some of the things I found out about these search and rescue dogs were, like so many things in the dog nutter world, just little asides, like a passing note or like a little tidbit, and I'm like, wait a minute, can you expand on that a bit? Because if you recall, some of the articles I read for the Dog Father episode on brood parasitism. Remember, there was one article that was talking about search and rescue dogs and how the handlers would always bring the training aid to the catastrophe site and hide the training aid among the rubble so that the dog could feel that it had accomplished its goal and like keep up the dog's morale by finding. Do you remember that? I'm searching for the article right now, but that blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, these search and rescue handlers are just like using a devastating catastrophe site to like play with their dog essentially. I don't know, it just really stood out to me because I'm like, if these are highly trained like search and rescue dogs and we're supposed to believe like, oh, they're finding all these people and almost like we couldn't do it without them, like why do you need their little like ball or whatever it is that you use and why are you taking the time to hide their toy among the rubble so that they can feel like they found something?
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I read the excerpt in the other call. I'm searching for the article now. I thought it'd be appropriate for this call, but yeah, if anyone wants to hear the specific thing I'm talking about, it's in the Dog Father episode.
Yeah. One thing it's important to bring up too is that, sort of like, okay, why bash these things? But these search and rescue dogs are a key component of the mutt matrix sort of endless loop of circular reasoning, because pursuant to the exchange I had on Reddit the other week was, they use situations like this as sort of proof that dogs are, they're super smart, they're super sentient, they're brave, loyal, courageous, selfless. They're of the highest moral fiber, right? As they say, okay, like how so? Like that's not my observation. Like, oh, more rescue dog hater, more rescue dog. Now, even if the dog does contribute something positive to the effort, and I'm really skeptical that it does, it's simply just a tool used to do a job. A dog does not understand the implications of something like this because it can't. It's oblivious. It's just sniffing around, and it reacts if it smells something interesting. And what that thing is, it could be anything. It could be a dead person. It could be a live person. It could be, leftover, Mugu Gaipan, who knows, right? All you know is it's reacting to something. And similar to, police sniffer dogs, police sniffer dogs have been shown to fail about 80% of the time, false positives and false negatives. And I'm sure that spills over into this domain also. What's interesting is pursuant to what Rodney said, I was reading this just earlier before the call started. So it says, but Nate, or Nate, I guess that's the name of one of the handlers, who is not allowed to say if Dig has found any survivors, says the pair is in for the long haul. So they're not, because like you're saying, Rodney, is like what? Like, is there any like warranty here or any guarantee of results? And no, there isn't. Not with any of these.
Yeah, like are they going to put their money where their mouth is? I mean, I'm not qualified to wholesale refute the, we'll say, utility of search and rescue dogs. Like, I fully admit that. But I do think you guys did a great job at approaching the subject with some healthy skepticism in the Dogfather episode, and it was kind of mind-blowing. So in that vein of just, trying to apply some healthy skepticism to it and say, well, are these claims in fact true, or at least as true as they're, representing them to be, right? Yep. The way I would go about trying to figure out the answer to that is, okay, like, what are you going to guarantee, right? Like, if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, that's just a street smart thing where it's like, okay, kind of, at least I'll believe that you believe what you're saying, right? But if you're not, and you've got all these carve outs and little, escape hatches as far as the quality of work and the results you can provide, stuff like that. That leads me to believe this is a little bit of a performative, that this isn't what you're making it out to be kind of thing, right?
Yep. And it's interesting as it says here, see what I've highlighted, but Nadi, who is not allowed to say if Dig has found any survivors. So you're kind of saying like, okay, show me some results. But according to this, the results are essentially classified. So I'm thinking, well, how convenient is that? Right? You can say, okay, did the dog actually accomplish any? Because finding a dead body really isn't that useful. I mean, first of all, anybody who died in the collapse is buried in that rubble pile. You know that, right? I mean, you don't need a dog. It's like bringing a dog to the beach to tell you that the ocean has water in it. You already know that, right? Now, it would be helpful, if you could find somebody who's alive and you could try to dig them out. And Dig is the dog's name, but it's like, okay, who was that? That's I guess a rhetorical question is like, who was actually saved? Like, whose life was spared by the participation of the dog? Like, give me a name. And I don't see that anywhere in here. I see a lot of this. Oh yeah. So yes, I'm tired. I'm emotionally drained, but I have this inner energy to bring anything I can to these people.
I'd like to
The
know.
whole.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, you go ahead. You've got more knowledge on the subject than I do, for sure.
Well, I was just going to say, this is, first of all, an example of what I'm talking about, where they just make these little aside, like passing statements. And I'm like, what? Can you pause on that for a second? Like, why are they not allowed to say anything? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not asking for specific, if it's, I understand like confidentiality of maybe the survivor doesn't want to be named, but like, you can't even say a number, like how many, you know what I mean? That wouldn't reveal their identity. Why? They just say this in passing. We're not allowed to say if he found anyone. But
Yeah.
why? Why?
I think that's good. Like, that's a fair take, and we want to be fair and conscientious, right? Like, there are proven use cases, I guess, like when the military is tracking somebody, right? Stuff like that. Like, yeah, that's maybe one out of the millions of use cases people put forward for dogs where, yeah, you got a point there. One, they get it right like 1 out of like 1,000 times. It's like, okay, that might be useful. Like I can, so, in fairness, I think it's just about asking questions and kind of approaching it with healthy skepticism and picking it apart and saying, to your point, like, all right, what's the baseline without a dog? What's the baseline detection rate of survivors without a dog? Baseline detection rate of dead bodies versus bodies you couldn't find, right? I imagine the delta above the baseline without a dog, especially for dead bodies, is like nothing, right? Like the dead body is in the pile of bricks and stuff. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So yeah, right. Like baseline, like how good do people do unaided without dogs? And how good do they do with dogs? What's the change? And are dogs better than something like thermal imaging, which thermal imaging wouldn't be useful here, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like, okay, would it be faster to get somebody out there with like radar or something like that to find the bodies and get the dogs out of the way so they can do their work?
That stuff also because, one thing that arose out of this was, okay, in that rubble pile, are there any voids, like spaces large enough to sustain a human life, at least temporarily, right? Like if the whole
My other question is, what are the actual requirements for these people and their dogs? Because I just went to Search and Rescue Dogs of the United States. It's like sardo, whatever, .org. And you can just, it looks like anyone can just sign up and go through these like scent training courses and register their dog. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a huge bar here to enter your dog in as like a search and rescue dog. Are these just like civilians that are allowed to like have their pets certified and then they can go on search and rescue missions? Like, is that the bar?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like, how do these contracts work? Like, what are the hoops you have to jump through to like be a vendor for this type of service, right? And how much money is changing hands? Because a lot of people would just think like, okay, I did a 2-week seminar on this, I'm qualified, let me throw my shingle out there and start making money, and it doesn't get questioned, and people just kind of assume, well, yeah, I've seen this on TV 100 times, so it must work.
Yep. Well, I've seen it, but again, there's never any real proof of results, because even if they had it, I don't know if they found any live persons in the rubble pile or not. I don't recall. I was following this case pretty closely at the time. That's why I brought it up. The only survivor I can recall was there actually a cat survived, a pet cat. They found a cat wandering around the rubble pile, and they scanned the chip, and it turned out that the cat lived in that part of the building. So either it, clawed its way out of the rubble pile, or perhaps jumped out as the building had collapsed. But I don't know if they found any live persons or not. I don't recall. But I guess the question is, like you were saying, Rodney, what is the baseline, without a dog? And then if you bring dogs in, does that make it better or worse? Because part of the problem is that the dog, it's a distraction. Right. It's like bringing dogs into anything. Right. I mean, even say service dogs, like, and, we see fake service dogs quite often. So you see somebody who at least superficially appears to be a fit person. They can see, they can walk, they can move their arms and fingers. And they're walking their dog in a grocery store. And I guess again, the premise is that they would be unable to access the venue without the dog, right? Like it's a necessity. But I'm thinking, really, the dog is actually takes away, right? It creates a deficit. Because if you're walking a dog, one hand is tied up with the leash, right? With walking the dog. So basically you for practical purposes lose an arm for the duration. But going back, going back to this.
Well, I was just going to throw out there, I think that sums the point up perfectly, is it kind of ties in with the diabetes dog, right? And I don't want to turn this into like a discussion of the state of technology today, but I would just ask the question, well, you've got a diabetes alert dog. Why would you spend 20 grand on one of those when the technology to detect if your blood pressure, or excuse me, your blood sugar is in a dangerous state or something has gone so far and is now so cheap and so efficient? You can just go with like a medical device, right, to tell you what's going on and alert you. So that little bucket of like, hey, is there another solution that is cheaper, works better than the dog? So for the search and rescue thing, again, I'm not an expert, but I would think, is there radar technology or something else out there that's probably, significantly cheaper than using a dog and could be more efficient, instead of letting the dog play on the site when people have like an hour of oxygen left or whatever it is, and letting the dog walk over it. Like, let's just use like, the technology available and get it done versus, coming in after the dog or whatever and letting them sort of disrupt the rescue effort. I don't know the answer to that question, but I feel like it doesn't get explored either.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest issues. Like you said, it doesn't get like nobody just really questions these things. Like, not only do we have to deal with like dog nuttery in general, but I feel like you would be seen as particularly heartless if you were like, is having this dog running over all this rubble while people are trying to like search for survivors really the best use of time and resources? Or are they just getting in the way of actual?
Like, is it the smartest thing to call the Paw Patrol dog to come look for survivors, or like, do we want to like, is there like something more practical here that we can do that's more efficient, like the diabetes thing? I think you guys may have touched on that in the dog fodder call. But
I mean, some people could say, okay, they didn't make the situation worse, but again, they're a distraction. It's like maybe you are, and I'm sure they did bring in some high-tech solutions also, like ground penetrating radar and other.
And then I'd want to see the baseline there, right? Like, okay, well, what's the baseline if we're using these technologies to find something, as opposed to, the dog? Like, where's the delta at? How many more marginal survivors were recovered by introducing the search and rescue dog to the situation versus all the other methods? And I hate to be redundant, but it's like people don't ask these questions, so we really don't know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, again, this is, you're thinking why perhaps some people think, why pick on them at all? Like, who cares? But when you consider this adversarial situation we're in with these people, with the mud cultists, is that, again, this is it's perhaps a performative stunt, but it's a propaganda stunt. Like I said, it's part of the whole mud cult endless loop of circular reasoning, because, they make these assertions about how dogs are just so over the top wonderful. And if you don't respect that, you're the spawn of Satan. So you say, okay, give me an example. Well, they use this as an example. But you think, okay,
it's like managing, they try to like manage to an exception, right? Which you never want to do in business or life, or if like, you're writing software or something. I'm not going to be able to write something that handles the most minute off the wall exception. If you look at the percentage of dogs in America, that it's got to be a fraction of a percent that are employed in search and rescue. And dog nutters disingenuously throw this in your face and say, well, I should be allowed to have 4 dogs in my studio apartment because sometimes dogs are used as search and rescue dogs, right? It's like, I'm not even going to address that insane exception to the general case, right? And that's why it's our time to kind of win, because they don't have an argument. Once again, dog nutters just don't have an argument, but they do throw the search and rescue dogs out there all the time.
Yeah, but it was funny, that reply I got on Reddit. I wish I really should snapshot more of this stuff, but this one of them just like completely lost their shit, because I said, I'm skeptical. Like, if I'd been living in that building at the time, I'd say, I bet you'd want a dog there. It's like, well, I'd probably be, squashed into ground up into cranberry sauce by the collapse. I'm not going to be wanting anything, right? They're going to lift all the rubble off. They're going to shovel what's left to me into a bucket, and that's going to be the end of it. And I kind of hate to put it in those terms. I mean, what happened here was a tragedy, but at one point I want to make too is that, like, stuff like this is used by these mutt nutters to promote Fido's reputation. And it's very low behavior. Like, don't use situations like this to, quote, prove that dogs are really fur angels sent from heaven. This doesn't prove anything.
It's like, I think that's important to state plainly as well for people who might be listening to stuff like this for the first time or getting into the space for the first time. Like, what's the point of addressing it? The point is picking apart the propaganda matrix, the substrate, the propaganda substrate that all the cult of dogs sits on, right? And the idea that of the heliocentric universe, right? Like Copernicus, the whole world revolves around dogs, and you're not allowed to question it, and you do, but it would be really funny to do a call of like greatest hits of like Reddit comments, just to like scroll through them and pick them apart. That'd be a lot of fun.
And even some of the comments it's always shout out to Kanon, because he posted something recently. And again, it was a kind of thing where the dog nutters came in with, like, again, all these sort of just this endless stream of mental diarrhea. Maybe I'll bring that up real quick, because I want to segue. There's a few things I wanted to cover today. So let me bring this up, and let me go to Kanon. Actually, shout out to Kanon also, because one thing that's been percolating in the background is we want to create, and maybe not just one, maybe multiple short documentaries sort of outlining the nature of the problem. And actually, I was working on something like that, but Kanon's video production skills are very, very good. I think he would be a good candidate to, at least be, create or produce or direct such a thing. Which one was it? Oh, because actually he'd done this too. It says dogs still don't save lives, and he was sort of addressing the same thing. But if you look at this, there's 83 comments in this video. This video got 252 views, and it has 83 comments. And that's the other thing I'd like to bring up, and look at this comment here from this Kate 936. Look at all this. It's like, oh boy, can't wait to get mobbed comment. Look at all this mental diarrhea, just this endless stream of vapid consciousness. So there's
Diary of a
that.
madman. Like
It's
crazy.
There go on, yeah, and there's that goes, and there's actually more down here also, and then there's this Beth McCoy. You can't read this. This is
No.
just, you can't. Like, I'm just, and actually here they're trying to claim that I guess the dogs saved them from a fire, but I can't. First of all, look at this. It's a solid block of text.
Stream of consciousness. Geez.
Yeah, it is. It's a stream of mental diarrhea, And it's like, who, broke down, our dog who was 16 broke down the bathroom door to get to her. And that's the same thing too, is the dog probably broke down the bathroom door because somebody took a dump, forgot to flush, and the dog wanted to eat it.
And like, what was maybe it's just the way my brain works, but like, it's always like, well, I'm making a mistake by even taking this screed seriously in any way. So that's my mistake. But like, if we get over that hump, what kind of door was it?
Well, dogs are busting through doors constantly, chewing up drywall, and like, how is this different than every day?
Well, that's the other thing. It's always important because, in argumentation, you say correlation is not causation. Right? Like, let's say you were to come here to Florida to visit me, and I'm sitting on my front porch with a banana stuck in my ear. And you say, yo, why do you have a banana stuck in your ear? And I say, well, it's to keep the polar bears away. But then you say, but there are no polar bears in Florida. I'm like, see, it works, right? Like, those two things have nothing to do with it. They're both true. Yes, I have a banana stuck in my ear. Yes, there's no polar bears in Florida, except maybe in zoos. But those two things have nothing to, they correlate, but they have nothing to do with each other. There's not a causal relationship there, but they do that a lot. It's one of their very common fails. It was interesting. A Canon replies, if this is an attempt to get a good mega troll going, perhaps someone else can indulge you. That's one thing. One thing I like about being in this space is there actually is a lot of entertainment value to be gained here. So in any case, I don't want to dwell on that too long. Also, I wanted to shift gears and talk about something else real quick. Because Sheepie, you brought this up. It was in the call, I guess. Well, I was on a call on your channel, and I think was it there but in any case, one thing that makes me really jealous of the other side is, they have Hitler and Stalin were both dog people. But I think, damn, who do we have? Who do we have in our, like, what iconic political leader would, provided they were still alive? Yeah, who's on our side? Like, who can we brag about, right? So we can brag about, we can brag about this guy. Thomas Jefferson was a dog hater. Now,
nice.
What's interesting too is that some people point out, because this comes up from time to time, and I think when he was younger, he liked dogs, but he outgrew that and became a dog hater later. And Sheepie, you had something interesting to say about him and sheep, and having sheep at the White House. Did you want to run through that real quick, or?
Oh yeah, sure. I don't have that pulled up, but just from memory, and it looks like you have pulled something up.
Yeah.
Which looks like it would be fun to read. But yeah, essentially, Thomas Jefferson was a raiser of sheep. He really liked sheep and owned a lot of them. And apparently, dogs killing his sheep became such an issue that he sent a letter to the overseer, I guess, of Monticello, requesting that he kill every single dog there.
Yep.
And in the context of the call we were doing, it was on how dogs have been used throughout history to suppress oppress and torment and terrorize people.
Yep.
So this in particular was to do with any dogs that were owned by Black slaves, I guess, at Monticello. So he said, kill every single dog owned by a Black slave there. But I think it was more because, there was probably a racial element, but I think it was more because dogs throughout all of time have been running amok and just murdering livestock.
Yeah.
And that was his major concern. He wanted them gone, killed, because they kept killing his sheep.
Yeah, but in any case, yeah, that was it. Because yeah, we covered that letter because you're right. He ordered his overseer to basically shoot dead all the dogs. But this was a letter to a friend of his. I guess people don't know Jefferson's history. I mean, he was the third president of the U.S. He was a primary author of the Declaration of Independence, and he also contributed quite a bit to the writing of the U.S. Constitution. He was president from 1801 to 1809. So this was written in 1811. So this was after he was out of office. So he's writing to this friend of his, Peter Minor, and I really like the way he communicates. He definitely was an expert communicator. So what does he say here? I participate in all your hostility to dogs and would readily join in any plan for exterminating the whole race. So like right away, boom. And that's a really good, like when you want to communicate something, it's particularly in writing, it's a good idea to make your point up front and then sort of digress and sort of drill down into it later. So then he goes on to say, I consider them the most afflicting of all the follies for which men tax themselves, right? So what he's saying, it's a point many people in our space make, is that he's basically saying that the dogs are just a big, people tax themselves with this stuff. It's a waste of time, money, other resources, perhaps, right? So, but then he goes on to say,
such a good line.
Yeah.
I want to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
that's so perfect.
Yeah,
right?
This goes too, was like, but he's also, I mean, remember Jefferson he was a brilliant communicator. He's also a brilliant politician. So, but he says here, and this goes into even creating this, anti-dog org, but his total extirpation cannot be hoped for. Let it be partial. What he's saying is like, yeah, like exterminating all of them, like banning dogs everywhere is not, it's like politically, it's just not something you can do, right? However, let it be partial. So he's saying, and there's a point, I mean, Rodney, you and I made this point last week. It's made often. It's like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing scenario. It's not like, okay, either you live in dog hell or they're just all gone, right? There's a lot of daylight between those two positions. So he says, let it be partial, right? So he goes on, I like, well, your outlines of a law for this purpose. But should we not add a provision for making the owner of a dog liable for all of the mischief done by him? I mean, Rodney, that's what you.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. That
And
like,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's just wild that because that's what I've reached that conclusion completely independently, and I think many people do as well, making the animal or at least their owner liable for what they do. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, my response was not as eloquent as what the other caller was going to say. I said wow like 3 times, but that's amazing because we've been talking about that.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because I mean, my that's been, my premise for a long time is that I could say perhaps it's true of other animals also, but if you're going to bring an animal into a human community, right? If you're going to claim ownership of it, you need to own what it does, right? And you could say perhaps that's true for other property because,
well, it goes back to Hammurabi, right? Like if you read, it's in the one of the first. I don't want to misspeak because I don't want to turn this into history nerd hour. And there's always like people always raise their finger and say, well, actually, but to my knowledge, Hammurabi was like the first written legal code that, everybody had to follow. Right.
Yep.
And this is in there. It relates to oxen, but concept's the same, right? Like if your ox gores somebody, eye for an eye time. So this idea transcends like first written, legal code of civilization all the way up to now in different points in between, like this case here, this just general human concept of like justice and accountability.
Yeah. But it seems, though, that, the dog owners are typically not, are exempt from that. That's really and that's really the problem. That's why I say it's a dog problem. Because if you consider, like, we'll say oxen, you can't have an ox in a downtown apartment tower or a suburban subdivision, right? They're zoned out farm animals, and you're required to keep them contained. There's all kinds of restrictions there. The problem is that there's, at least for practical purposes, there's no restrictions in the keeping of dogs at all, right? Yeah, you want to have 5 Rottweilers in your 300 square foot apartment? Yeah, you do that. Great idea,
And where there are reasonable restrictions, states like California, this is a recent one. I'll make this quick, although I would like to plug maybe 10 minutes on this call if we can at some point to just do like a little legal roundup and go over some interesting cases of research that are pretty cool.
Sure.
But just to promote the cause of, like, let's start doing something about this and changing the situation. But anyway, even states like California is looking into, there's a dog nutter in the legislature who has proposed that landlords can no longer say we're not accepting pets and we're not accepting certain breeds, and they always turn it into like a giant human rights issue, which is so disgusting because this is about your preference for a folly, an activity,
right.
Personal. So don't, but anyway, so right, zoning can't have, there's like almost no rules about dogs. You can have as many as you want, and in areas where there are at least some common sense rules put in place by property owners, cities, whatever, dog nutters are working to erode what little rules there are left. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important for people to consider. It's not so much that there's no restrictions or that if there are, they're not enforced. That a lot of times the restrictions themselves are restricted, because you noted, that California, they're agitating to basically make it illegal to they say pets, but it's like, what pets are they talking about? In California, ferrets are banned as pets. You can't have them, but you can have, pit bulls and Rottweilers and Corsos and all that kind of stuff. And not only are they legal, but now they're telling, landlords and lower jurisdictions, even like lower governments, you can't restrict those dogs. You can restrict other animals. I love they say pets. Yeah, when do I get my pet mountain lion? I kind of got into somebody on the Reddits with that also. You know how difficult it is? Yeah, I live in Florida, which is like the deregulation capital of the entire earth. You know how hard it is? It's like virtually impossible, to have any large cat, right? And all, like, New York is another good example, because many states, they have preemption laws. Florida is a preemption state. New York is a preemption state. Now, New York, or at least New York City, has banned Bengal cats, not Bengal tigers. A Bengal is a house cat, wild cat hybrid, but they're about the same size as a normal house cat. So, your average adult weight is like 10 to 15 pounds, right? There have been 0 deaths or serious injuries related to them that I know of. But if you live in New York City, at least it's my understanding, banned. However, New York is a preemption state, meaning that you can't discriminate against dogs by breed. You can discriminate against every other animal, but not dogs. So, you can't have a Bengal, but you can have a 90% wolf hybrid. So I'm thinking, what sense does that make? I mean, it's totally unreasonable. But there are people, there's legal obstacles to these things, because particularly if you want to, put in those kind of restrictions, whether you're a local government or a landlord or whatever, they're starting to lock that down. And in fact, even in Florida, they passed some legislation about a year ago. First of all, vacating all BSL, all breed restrictions at the local level. And it also said you can't discriminate by breed in public housing, where the government is the landlord. So if you live in a public housing development, your neighbors can have all the pit bulls and Rottweilers they want. It's
Which is
ridiculous.
insane to me because
Yeah.
people in public housing, whatever your opinion on that is, they're already vulnerable, right? They're already having a rough time, to say the least. These are vulnerable people.
Yep.
Did they not get a say in their quality of life? It's the other side of the coin, because a lot of people say that you're like a, they hurl some pretty rough epithets at you if you say like, oh, we should ban this breed or ban dogs here, right? And they act like it's a repeat of the civil rights movement, which is just totally ridiculous, comparing dogs to humans and stuff like that. And, that's just the rebuttal is, well, do people in low income areas not deserve quality of life and to be safe from these vicious animals, because they're more impacted than anyone else is, really.
Yeah, because you got people like you're barely getting by to begin with, and then you got, you can't walk from your front door to the elevator without getting tackled by a Corso or whatever.
Yeah, if it's like a block apartment, housing, public housing area. Look, things are bad enough. Like, these people are going through tough enough situations. Why are we making it worse, right?
Yeah,
And
yep.
that was
Point we
insane.
make too is that it was funny. I wrote, and I got a ton of heat for this, and maybe it's a bit controversial, but our position should always be that owning any pet is a luxury and a privilege, right? And the thing is that if they talk about, say, public housing, should taxpayer dollars be going towards housing dogs, at least in that manner, right? It's one thing to house them at the, animal shelter, the dog pound, but should public money be going towards that? Because in a sense, now we're actually subsidizing the problem, right? In a sense, right? Because now we're saying, oh yeah, it's like to alleviate poverty and homelessness, we're going to, provide public housing to these people, right? It's a, welfare state solution, but should we be promoting that, particularly given the dogs cause so many problems, right? Particularly, I mean, it's a net negative for the community in general. So should the state be, underwriting such a thing? I don't think that it should, but then you get into all these like class war type debates. Like, they'll tell you you're a classist, you hate poor people, if you don't want to, like I said, subsidize this.
And half of these people that get into this insane, that would call you, oh, you're a classist because, you think it's okay to ban dogs, and we'll say public housing. I think broadly, hey, look, if an apartment complex says we're dog free, great. If they want to do BSL at apartment complex, public housing or not, great, that's fine. It's totally reasonable. But all these people that say this, I would challenge them. I would like to know, when was the last time you've been in public housing? What's your experience with public housing? When was the last time you, went to that side of town and interacted with folks and got to know people and this and that? Because, I mean, I hate to be that guy, but I have a decent amount of experience with it. And the person I feel bad for is the old lady who lives there and can't walk outside because, somebody's kid wanted to start breeding pit bulls. I mean, I know we're not trying to just focus exclusively on pit bulls, but like, that's the reality. Or, oh, the kids can't play outside today in the courtyard of the public housing, apartment complex. Well, why is that? Because one neighbor has decided that he's going to breed dogs in his apartment or his mom's apartment. Or
and
whatever.
It's also too, as you live in close proximity, that dogs in apartments are just a terrible idea, particularly because it's even an animal welfare issue there. Like, you take, say, a husky, right? It's a Siberian sled dog, but they think, it's a great idea to cram these things into apartment buildings in Florida. And that's what happens. And the dog becomes a nuisance because the dangerous dog problem is it's the tip of the iceberg. Because what else do you have? Well, you've got, barking, you've got noise pollution. You've also got dog fouling, not just outside the building, but inside it also. You read all the time, people say, yeah, there's like literal dog piss and shit in the, hallway of my apartment building. And the whole place stinks. You can't sleep because there's constant dog barking, right? It's literally, by allowing this, they're creating dog hell. Yeah, and they shouldn't be allowed to do it.
Yeah, people can't achieve like a natural stasis that they need in their own home, sleep, it's just constant stress, constant like broken windows, right? It's just one thing after another degrading the environment folks live in. And, eventually those little things add up.
Yep. Sheepie, did you have any thoughts on this? Still there?
I love the whole letter. It makes me happy to read. Oh, one thought I did have was I hear a lot how much worse the dog issue is now, and people have gone crazy. It got bad in the 90s, or got bad after COVID, people adopted all these dogs. And I think that's probably true. But I feel like things like this really demonstrate that dog nuttery is an issue that has been really long-lived. It's been going on a long time, because I mean, he even says later in this letter, here it says, I'm satisfied that taking the whole mass of dogs in the state into consideration, the average of what they get fairly and unfairly of the food fit for man would feed a man.
Yeah.
Are there not as many sheep and hogs annually lost to the owners by dogs or with their aid as there are dogs in the state? I mean, he's talking about dogs getting food fit for a man. Like, I don't know. I just feel like dog nuttery is an issue that's been going on for such a long time.
Yep.
Like, we can even find Thomas Jefferson complaining about them in 1811, wanting to exterminate the whole race of them and considering them the most afflicting of all the follies for which men tax themselves. I love this so much.
Yeah.
This was a great time.
That's an interesting point. I mean, the dog cult has been with us for a long time. I mean, maybe even going back before recorded history, but it didn't really, I think, become a crisis until maybe 20 years ago. I mean, I think there was always a lot of problems, but I guess it was perhaps manageably bad. I feel what's happening, but I think really what's key here is like what's causing people to do this. And you can't, a lot of folks insist that it's an economic issue, and it's not, because if you look back then, there was no pet industry in 1811. There wasn't, but yet there was a problem with dogs. But I think, Sheepie, that concept you brought forward with a brood parasite is, I think, because you always think, and even when I got into the space of thinking, like, what is it about this? Because, it's not an economic issue. It's not really your normal social fad. Like, what is driving this thing? And I'm almost at the point, I mean, I was never a very religious person, but I'm thinking, you know what, if Satan himself were behind this, like if it turns out that were indeed the case, I would not be surprised at all.
I'm right there with you, honestly.
I would be like, yeah, I would be totally, now I'm not saying that it is, but the brood parasite theory is very, very credible. And I think it's pretty obvious that that's the case, that, again, these animals, the dog nutters call us like co-evolutants. I guess it's the word, like, we co-evolved. And it's like, no, if anything, they've devolved us. But they in the thousands of generations they've been around human beings, they've evolved the ability, I mean, it's unconscious, but sort of an innate ability to, exploit the nurturing instincts in humans. right?
Right.
That puts some evolutionary pressure on them, because if they could do that, dogs that could do that were more likely to get resources. Dogs that got resources were more likely to reproduce, and so forth, and on and on and on. And I think clearly, but what's interesting is like, okay, why isn't everybody, enthralled by these things or enraptured by them? And I think it's because, some people are just, inherently more resistant than others. And it goes back to, Rodney, what you and I talked about, or we talk about often, is that, people in our space have, we're more conscientious. We have a sense of personal responsibility. We're high functioning. We support and promote various civic and civilizational values, or high maturity level, high IQ, lots of life experience. And I think in those things make people more resistant to this. Now, often your dog nutters are the opposite. They're low IQ. They're people who do stuff like this. They're totally
they don't return their shopping cart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't return the shopping cart. And I
Yep.
think that's why to the other points that were made just a second ago about, it's interesting to see that this dog nuttery has been around forever. It's also like a comorbidity with being a terrible neighbor and a terrible participant in the community. And that's more where we're coming from. Like they always want to characterize it as, oh, you don't want to allow dogs in apartments because you just woke up one morning and decided to bear a grudge against dog owners. And it's not the case. This is coming out of a pro-human, pro-social standpoint of like wanting, like you get it, like put your shopping cart back. Dog nutters don't really like to do that.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, they're like low con. So I think that's what it is that, if you're a conscientious person and, you're able to reason, you have critical thinking skills, you're high functioning, high maturity level, and so forth, is very resistant to this. And maybe you could sort of at least correlate it to sort of, it's a decline of those kind of things, like those sort of advanced social skills. Generally, you could say that, people are extending their adolescence, longer. People are, you've got the gamer kid. There's actually one of these, one of my, favorite trolls. I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm actually really good at finding people on the internet. Is a 40-year-old, unemployed as far as I can tell, or marginally employed, lives with their parents, has a bunch of dogs, and plays video games all day. Like, but that's a kind of person, I think, who is very, very susceptible to this, whatever you want to call it, like this breed or this parasitical tendency of these creatures. So
I think there's also something about like susceptibility to sentimentality or something. Like you talk a lot about animal and control, people having just in general a less of an understanding of reality and how things work and what it takes. I feel like people who aren't susceptible to, I guess, brood parasitism or whatever also have the ability not to be overly sentimental. Like, I don't know if that's the right term to use, but we don't look at dogs and think, oh, what a cute baby. You know what I mean?
Not completely like emotionally driven. Like, yes. I think bear cubs are cute, right? But like if one approaches me or if a bear approaches me in the woods, I'm going to pepper spray that thing, right? Like it's like, yeah, I think things are cute too. And, whatever, even, all kinds of animals, right? They're cute, but I can also override that emotional response and say, I probably shouldn't touch that thing. That doesn't make sense. Or they're cute when they're in their environment, but you shouldn't. Basic reasoning ability, I mean, is what it is. It's a lack of. I wouldn't say that. Not that I disagree at all with the previous statement at all, and I'm not nitpicking in any way, but I wouldn't say it's a lack of sentimentality on our side. It's a lack of basic reasoning skills on the other side.
Yeah.
They're so
Yep.
emotion driven that their brain just shuts off, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And what I like to say that, like, too, it's sort of about being compassionate or sentimental. But I like to look at things, I'm just speaking for myself, but I think many of us do, look at it sort of holistically, right? Like take a big picture point of view, and it may, segue into some other stuff I wanted to go over real quick. But like, for example, today we have these, no kill policies and mentalities where a dog that's attacked multiple people, oh, we need to, poor Rover, he just needs more training. The poor little fur baby was, provoked and all that kind of stuff. And you're thinking, okay, even if you have some sympathy for the dog, you got to have sympathy for the dog's victims, you past, present, and potential future, right? Because I think one reason,
Exactly. Dude,
you
there's just
have
such
to,
a lack of sentiment. Sorry, but it's like there's such a lack of concern for the victims. And I mean,
yeah,
that's what like the emotional response in me to like want to do something about it is there's a lot of human suffering, and my priorities are in order. I'm more sentimental for the people that are going through this. They're losing money, they're losing, their housing value, all the way up to losing their lives, their
yeah.
children. Why does no one on that side ever bother to consider these even dog nutters like the ones in Tennessee, the poster children for dog nuttery, where dogs killed both of their kids?
Oh
Both
my
kids.
gosh.
Yeah, it's like I'm not the monster. You are, dude. Like
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
exactly.
you don't care
And
about
you
people
could
at all.
see that. We'll talk about double standards was, even if you read the GoFundMe pages, yeah, those two faced no charges. And and what's interesting too is I didn't want to cover that in this episode, but that has turned into a very interesting case also, because I think Sheepie, you and I had discussed that in the background. It was a Bernard case
Yeah.
where a family long story short, it was a couple in their 30s. They had two small kids. I think it was a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. There was a pair of pit bulls that I think they were the dad's dogs, but they were about 8 years old. And one day, the dogs, they just both decided to pit out and deleted both kids. And what was interesting, yeah, the reaction was, but even people, in the GoFundMe, pages, the comment sections, like, not only did you lose your children, but your precious dogs. And I'm like, oh man, holy
Yeah, there's a
crap.
form of wickedness that is pervasive on the dog nutter side.
Yeah.
I think it's just
Yes.
like people don't really understand. I'm hesitant to use the term wickedness or evil unless I kind of mean it, but it's not always Dracula that's like evil, right? Like that
Yeah.
archetype. There's a form of it that is like the adult child, the cute, cuddly, but like that level of, I'm not articulating this well, but it is a form of, I would say, wickedness and decadence,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh,
Decadent for sure,
totally. Yeah.
yes, is a good term, I think. And just to be a little more precise, I guess what I was meaning is like there's nothing wrong with being like sentimental, but there's a point where it becomes almost pathological. Like what I was thinking of is like hoarders. If you've ever seen like the hoarders shows, a lot of them have an extreme sentimentality for stuff that's literally garbage.
Yeah.
But they cannot part with it for some pathological reason in their psychology. They're like, oh, I can't throw this little scrap of whatever away because it's got some kind of sentimental
Yeah,
value to me.
those were grandma's candy wrappers. I can't throw
Yeah.
those away.
And so, like, overly sentimental is an adjective that describes someone or something that feels or shows pity or love excessively. So that's more what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
takes sentimentality to a pathological, like, level.
Yeah, take it to a path, but like I said too, well, it's that definitely. Yeah, they take it. Well, I guess it used to be like a dog culture, for example, like to follow your points. Like now they take that sentimentality just to a ridiculous level, right? They will be, endlessly virtue signal for a dog that is just the nastiest piece of shit in existence. But it didn't used to be that bad.
Right.
Like when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, it was like, yeah, dog that attacked got deleted, right? It either got a bullet in the gourd, it got Christy gnomed, or it got juiced at the vet. It was intolerable. And even people who liked dogs at the time,
Reason prevailed. Reason still prevailed over them.
Even dog people would be like, okay, it's really sad that Rover had to get put down, but it was the right thing, right? It's just so it's like, okay, the dog can't be trusted around people or other animals. So it wasn't like, no, we're not going to endlessly try to rehab it. We're not going to try to rehome it, because dumping a problem in someone else's lap is per se unethical. So yeah, the dog got deleted, right? And that's just what you did, right? It was considered, and even dog lovers at the time were okay with it. Now they're not. Now you say, yeah, okay, the dog that, and we could dig into this. I wanted to actually look at this case. This was interesting. Wake County dog released to family days after attacking toddler. So this shit beast chomped down on the face of a 2-year-old, right? And normally the dog would get put down, but the mother campaigned to keep the dog alive. I know if Chef Muttmeat were on this call, she'd probably have a few choice words to say. Maybe I won't go there, but so this, and also notice too, this is not a pit bull. So yeah, this gunner, okay, bit this kid on the face. Okay, so this is, and I don't know if I'm getting a strike for showing this, but this is after, it's lots of, reconstructive surgeries and the like, but even the people and the family and the mother are like, oh, poor Rover, because he got stuck in, I guess the county put the dog in quarantine for a couple of weeks. Like, oh, poor.
He misses his family.
Misses his family, he misses his family. Well, the thing is, yeah, like in a dog pound, there's no toddlers to chow down on. That's probably why the dog is upset. Right. So, but that's the kind of thing like, but see, the thing is, 40, 50 years ago, this would have been totally unacceptable. And the kind of thing is, anybody who would have not deleted the dog within 24 hours would have been shunned everywhere, right?
Yes.
But yeah,
see, this woman has an excessive amount of pity for the dog. She has an excessive amount of pity for the wrong thing here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's almost like that wickedness aspect of like, it's part of that. Like there's the pathological bucket where maybe somebody can't, like a hoarder, right? They're mentally ill. They're not 100% in control of what they're doing. And somebody needs to step in and just like, set things right. And then there's the bucket of people who are sound-mindedly sidestepping egregious human suffering to promote a personal agenda, right? And that's just awful. I mean, that's the only word for it.
And plus, I think pursuant to that, there's a virtue signaling aspect to this also. So there's another shout out to Dog Culture Review. He did something recently, because I believe he lives in Oregon, and he brought up a situation where fight bust dogs from New Jersey are being shipped to Oregon, or probably other places also. I guess I'm a New Jersey person. I wasn't aware of New Jersey as being this big dogfighting hotspot, but apparently it is. Also, New Jersey is a preemption state also. And that's basically, as an aside, I'm going to go off on a tangent for a bit, but one problem with legal pit bulls, or really any fighting dog, is that it enables dog fighting, because dog fighters can hide in plain sight. But going back to what I was saying was that back in the 80s, the best practice regarding fight bust dogs was it just euthanize them all. So when you busted a dog fighting operation, say circa 1980, all the dogs got the juice. And you could say, yeah, it's kind of, dog lovers say, okay, that's kind of sad, because the consensus at the time was that they were too risky to be put back into circulation, because these are dogs that are not only bred to fight, they've been trained to fight, they're experienced fighting, and apparently, they get a real, I guess, endorphin boost out of it. So the thing is, fight bust dogs. It was a no-brainer. They all got put down. Now they don't. Now they get shipped out to other places. So now, these fight bust dogs are being, shipped from New Jersey to Oregon, where they can, maul more people or perhaps facilitate dog fighting interests there. But it's all. But that's. Sorry, go ahead.
So just to hit on your statement, because there's a couple powerful components worth breaking down. In the 80s, great phrase of the day, reason prevails, right? Like, reason prevailed. We didn't get overly emotional about it. It was, this is an unfortunate circumstance, but also the value for human life and health said, look, we just can't risk it. That's too great of a risk of one person getting attacked, maimed, whatever. The risk is too high. We're going to weigh the risk and the reward and our emotional feelings about it and make the right choice for people, the safe choice for people. Like lawn darts, how many kids actually got hurt with lawn darts before they banned those things and said, oh no, this is too crazy, another kid's going to get hurt, right? Like stuff like that. We used to have like a higher value for human life and health. And you could reason out the right choice there and make the call and throw the guy who was fighting the dog in prison for a long ass time, and just move on. If you're mad at somebody, don't get mad at the people cleaning up the problem. Get mad at the person who caused it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dog fighters do go to prison. That's what's interesting, is that's a case where the rare case where the owner is held accountable. But now this seems the best practice is, they'll quote rehabilitate him. I think that really started with the Michael Vick case. That sort of kicked off the whole let's rescue them all kind of mentality. But
it was the perfect storm of a celebrity dog owners waiting in the wings for their open door, their perfect moment, where it was everywhere that an NFL quarterback had been running a dog fighting ring. And they just, you got to give them credit. They were organized and they pounced when the opportunity showed itself. And that became the big cause for like rehabilitating fight dogs when, normally they just be quietly euthanized and we'd all move on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's something that changed about the whole, like the premise changed, right? Like dog fighters go to prison for what, like animal cruelty? You know what I mean? That's the wrong thing. Like they should be in prison for endangering the community.
Yeah.
Right. Like, the dogs are bred to fight, and like you said, they actually enjoy it. Like they don't feel a pain response the same way we
anthropomorphizing dogs.
Exactly. It became about the dog again. The premise is about the dog, not the community, not the human beings. Like the dog is bred to fight. It wants to kill. It likes to do that. That's why it should be put down. You know what I mean? That's why it should not be rehabilitated and sent back out into the public. Like it wasn't trained to fight, or I mean, it may have been trained to fight better, but it innately wants to fight. Like that's
it was bred for that.
Fight bust dogs. I think a fight bust dog is probably more dangerous than just say your average pet pit bull. But that's not to say that your average pet pit bull is perfectly safe to have around, but since it has that background in violence, that this is a dog that'll, again, it's kind of like why we have so many dog attacks is because it's, repeat offenders. Dogs that attack are not put down. They're put back into circulation where they can do it again and again and again. So, but any case, yeah, fight bust dog is a dog that's essentially proven dangerous. It's
Yeah,
going
there's
to,
no
it'll use
right.
violence to
There's no
get what it
questioning
wants.
it.
Yep.
Right.
And then so they've spent an untold amount of money, and a significant chunk of money has also changed hands behind the scenes, I would assume. Someone started a charity grift to traffic dogs from New Jersey all the way to the other side of the continent in Oregon so they can create more problems. I mean, it's not going to fix the dog, so it's setting money on fire. But I also think, yeah, there is like a more, hate to be conspiratorial about the dog nutter cabal that's making all this money behind the scenes, but like, I can almost guarantee there's some weird nonprofit grift going on here.
Oh,
like,
totally.
For
I mean,
sure.
like I said, it's not necessarily this overall thing is not necessarily an economic issue, but
if
yeah,
they get $50,000 in donations, right, to do this, we'll say, or 10,000 or whatever, whoever's running that, I would like to see bank statements, right? Because if you've got 10 grand and it's going to cost you like 12, 13, 14, 20 to individually place each one of these dogs in the type of home that they say that dog needs with a lot of attention and training, etc., those costs are going to go up. So they're just going to, I would question that. So it's going to eat into your bottom line. So are you really doing your due diligence when you rehome these things, quote unquote, even if I accept their premises?
well, that's
It's
the
like probably
other.
not. They're just dumping them,
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, is that the other grift here is when they rescue meat dogs from various places, like it's China or Vietnam.
Yeah.
And but it turned out that actually was exposed, or at least one of those operations was exposed as a total grift, because they said, oh yeah, donate money and we'll fly to China and prevent Fido from becoming lo mein. And they took in a
Yeah.
bunch of money. I don't have that up, but apparently that was turned out, because then people are saying, okay, where did my donations go? Like, how many dogs were actually rescued? What were the outcomes? And I guess apparently they just closed up shop and disappeared. It was a huge scam, essentially. But yeah,
Anytime you start measuring the outcome, that's when things, are revealed. So yeah, I'll land this plane, but like, what I suspect is happening is they see some dogfight dogs in New Jersey, politically not feasible or whatever for them to just quietly euthanize the dogs, which is the only right answer. So they take the dogs off. They alleviate the responsibility from whatever New Jersey bureaucrat has been saddled with it. They're happy to get rid of them. They
yep,
collect some money and then they just boop transfer them to a new shelter in Oregon. Eventually either the dogs go to a home and then they go to the shelter, so there might be an extra stop, or they go directly to some taxpayer funded shelter. So they're making money while taxpayers are footing the bill and the safety
yep,
risk for the stupidity.
yep. Totally. Yep. Yeah, that whole all that needs to be, shut down. Like I said, this new org, I think high on the list of things to do is to agitate. Well, first of all, like expose these grifts, these scams, and get them shut down, because and I'm sure there's probably some actual criminality involved here also. You probably got commingling of assets and transfer to insiders, and misappropriation of various resources. And that's the thing, the whole mutt matrix is totally corrupt. And I think in exposing that corruption would help quite a bit, because that's the thing is, we could starve them of resources. If we can convince people, it's like, look, this is, you're donating the money to something. It's not really doing anybody any good. It's probably not even doing the dogs any good, because even if you're a pit bull lover, that, okay, all you're doing is setting the dog up to fail again, right? Like it's, yeah, they bring it to Oregon where it's going to run the neighborhood, attack people, and it's probably going to wind up getting shot by the cops or run over by a car. It's like, what purpose is the whole operation? Even if you like dogs, the whole operation serves no purpose. And that's even provided that rescue is doing what they say they're doing, which they may not be in many cases. So all
If
that
they
has
are doing what they're saying they would doing, or excuse me, if they were doing what they're saying they're doing, the shelters in Oregon should be up in arms about the whole thing, because
oh
those
yeah,
shelters are already overflowing. So they want to whine about, oh, our shelters are overflowing. People, you got to adopt the dogs, adopt the dogs, adopt the dogs. How are you not mad that someone is transferring dogs from another state to yours when you're already at max capacity? If your
yeah.
whole thing is, we
Right.
got to get the shelter numbers. So the whole thing is just dishonest. But I don't know if we've got like just a couple minutes to talk about the Pacific Northwest, because I found some interesting things there that kind of fit the vein of our prior discussion. If I can, if
Yeah,
we want
sure.
to talk
Knock
about.
yourself out. It's all interesting.
So I think big thing that I want to just try to, repeat a lot is our system for dealing with dog nutters and their pets is imperfect, and it massively favors the other side. And right now, with the tools that exist, um, I get it. They're imperfect, they're awful, but you can wage guerrilla lawfare and you can win. It's an asymmetric battle. But if you're sitting there feeling hopeless, there's stuff you can do if you're in a situation where a dog owner is wrecking your life, right? So this was pretty cool. This a couple in Oregon, and there's a man in Seattle. Couple in Oregon won a judgment for $500,000 because their neighbor's Tibetan Mastiffs were barking nonstop for, I think, 10 years is how long they let this go on.
Jeez.
But yeah, and when I saw the common response from, the dog nutter side and the brainless rabble is, well, dogs bark, that's what they do. Have you ever seen how loud a Tibetan Mastiff barks?
Oh
It's
yeah.
crazy. It's louder than a jackhammer. So Oregon couple
Oh, that's
won 500K on a suit they brought against their neighbors for their dogs barking. The dogs didn't kill anybody yet. They didn't bite anybody's hand. Something as simple as barking creates a nuisance for you that prevents you from your quiet enjoyment of your property. And you can take action. You don't have to wait till something worse happens. So they took action. They waited a little long, in my opinion. And it's something you would need a lawyer for, because $500,000 is beyond
yeah. Well,
small
that's
claims limit.
superior court kind of stuff. Yep.
But they won 500K, so they're going to get their neighbor's property if they've got the stomach to, enforce the judgment they won. And the judge issued an injunction telling the dog nutter neighbors, you've got to get these vocal cords clipped within 60 days because you can't let this go on. So that's one case where innocent people, prevailed. Another case in Seattle, there was a man who lived next door to a woman whose dog, I think the dog's name was Copper, Cawuper, would bark incessantly. So the man did what he needed to do, got a lawyer, went to court, served her a notice. Typical dog nutter fashion, the lady did not appear in court
Yep.
because she
Yeah.
felt like it was a joke. Which, hey, to a dog nutter, yeah, dog barking, they're inconsiderate. They would think, oh, this is ridiculous. Somebody would actually sue me for my noise machine ruining their sanity all the time. They don't look at it that way. So she didn't take it seriously. Boom, default judgment for 500K,
Yep.
and I hope he attaches the lien to the property and, gets it.
Yeah.
Frankly. So those are two, and then, of course, we've got the case. It always seems like 500,000 is the magic number once you lawyer up and go to like the
Yeah. Well, there's
higher
probably
level
some
civil
kind
courts.
of there's probably some kind of threshold. I mean, you and I have
Sure.
discussed this, and there's been a lot of back and forth on, suing, and
Yeah.
maybe that's like $400,000 or $500,000 is the magic number where an attorney will take the case on contingency, meaning they don't bill you by the hour. Instead, they just take a percentage of whatever's, well, not necessarily awarded, because what's awarded isn't necessarily what's collected.
But
But
well, they get
still,
skin in the game, and they say, hey, I know you can't pay me, but you've got a claim here, so I'll roll the dice, and if we win, I get my cut and you get yours. But yeah, just really quick, case in Biloxi, $500K judgment against ex-cop neighbor whose trained pit bull attacked a couple's child twice, not once but
yeah.
twice. That's how screwed up the laws are.
Yeah, that's what I have up on the screen. I was trying to find the barking dog case and I couldn't, but yeah, they got this. But it's a kind of thing where criminalizing dog attacks is key, because this was, I think, the second time the dog had mauled a kid. Like, there should never be a second time.
Right.
I
So
mean,
anyway, I'm landing the plane. I know that was like a rapid fire, like legal roundup or whatever,
yeah,
but it was just interesting. 3 cases back to back that show like, yeah, it's going to be a hard fight. I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'm not saying it's easy, but to people who are in a rough situation, my heart goes out to you. And those are 3 tangible examples in a row where people were able to enforce accountability on a dog nutter. 2 were just for barking. 1 was for, really egregious. And in my opinion, they haven't been made whole because their child was injured. But regardless, bottom line, people who say there's nothing you can do about it, there's options.
there are
Like you can
things. Oh,
try.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to think, you got to be a bit creative too. It's like, okay, what are all the options? And,
And you can get a dog nutter judge or a jury. You're talking about preponderance of evidence in civil court. It's going to vary by state, but I don't think civil court requires unanimous verdicts. It's kind of like the majority if there's a jury involved. If not,
yep.
then you might be in front of a judge. But yeah, you can get a dog nutter judge and dog nutter jurors that just completely make the wrong decision. Courts do it all the time. There's people who have been in that situation, and my heart goes out to them. There's nothing I can say at that point, but you need to at least try to fight back, and there are options.
Yep.
Yes. Sorry, that was a long-winded kind of quick one.
No.
But
I mean, that's an excellent point, and it needs to be made often. And quite frankly, if more people stood up for themselves, that would go a long way towards rolling this thing up.
And if attorneys, I mean, I'm sorry, but law is a business. Attorneys are in business. It's a trade. If more attorneys start seeing dollar signs with dog issues, you kind of, I mean, Ariel made the best point about it in that call, but you get that capitalist machinery humming, and now it's like, okay, like there's synergy here, and this is what it's going to take. It's going to take lawsuits to stop the dog nutter. We're at that point where we've got to start taking legal action and making examples of these people to end this. And and again, it's a human suffering thing. It's got to be brought to an end, and that's
well, I think that's part of the problem too. Is our team has to start playing some offense. I don't know if you remember, like from the call I had with Colleen Lynn, in that she gets legally harassed quite frequently because, like, for example, when one of these nutter orgs wants to get a pit bull ban or some kind of dog law repealed, the municipality, like a lot of people, even they'll use her site as a source for information. So they'll drag her. She and I had this conversation. She got dragged into a whole series of like 10-hour depositions. And I told her, I said, they're totally doing that just to harass you. But we could
we're gonna turn up the pain until you cry uncle and quit. Like that's the point of dragging. And yeah, that's what I mean by guerrilla lawfare. The process is the punishment. If you drag a dog nutter into small claims court, if you serve them with legal papers, every step up that chain is more and more pressure to force them, because you can't argue with these people. We're not here to reason with them. That's out the
Right.
window. So they need, harder consequences. Every step up that chain is more and more pressure to make you cry uncle. They're doing it to a nice lady like Colleen Lynn, great person. They're doing the exact same thing, so it's
Yeah.
time to kind of fight fire with fire at this point.
Yeah. But I think I'd like to go after some of these orgs also, like we were talking about, many of these, doggy charities and rescues and lobbying groups. These are criminal organizations. And I think there's probably some traction to be gained there also, because let's start, let's counterattack. Let's start hassling them also. I'd like to see some of that too. But that's the kind of thing really only an organization can do. Like, as an individual, you can go after like your neighborhood dog bully and win. Perhaps maybe 75% chance. An organization really needs to take on, another organization. So.
Yeah, well, like organizing, right, the definition of the word, if you just can start figuring out how do we pool resources and create something that's where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And then you pick a single target and make an example of it. And that's what they do. That's what they've tried to do. So I don't see why we can't do the same thing. And the shelters the shelters are already overflowing because a great many dog nutters have jumped off the deep end and made a terrible decision, and they eventually come to a breaking point where they surrender the animal. Like a lot of them, dog nutters are always like, oh, this poor lady had to get rid of her dog because she couldn't find an apartment that would let her move in with the dog, and that's why not a tenth of why the shelters are overflowing. The shelters are
Well, I think
overflowing
that
because
one reason
dog nutters have realized that the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
So
that's
yeah,
it's complicated because
if you start adding like legal consequences to it, that many more are going to slide off the table, and start anyway. Just that's my point.
One reason we have shelter overcrowding is because of no-kill policies. Oh yeah, you're right. It's like as people get these things without performing their due diligence. Well, we didn't have shelter overcrowding, say in the 1970s, because no animal, period, stayed in the shelter for more than a couple of weeks. Owner surrenders or strays, got the juice in 10 days to 2 weeks, so that's a big, but that's the kind of thing, that's something we can agitate against that also, because it's created, well, it's a humanitarian nightmare. And also, has negative consequences for public health and public safety. So, but that's
and
something
how many chickens do we slaughter like a day for food, right? I'm not saying that like it's right or wrong, but like society is okay with, we'll say, killing some animals for a greater purpose of like eating or whatever. Like that's commonplace. Most people eat meat at least once a day, right? So the idea of like euthanizing dogs, all of a sudden we don't have the stomach for that, but we can, so it's yeah. Anyway,
what goes to the point that dogs have, they have the ridiculous standing, right? They're, you can't forget about killing a dog for food. You can't kill a dog that's, mauling a toddler, right? But that's part of this whole thing. And it's even when we got, I started this segment off with bashing the search and rescue dogs, is that, Fido's reputation needs to come down a couple of notches. Because then if that happens, then the rest of the stuff becomes a lot easier, but
and I'm sorry to bring up the legal thing, but like that is something I'm researching, in my free time when I have it, is just to kind of educate myself and hopefully other people so we can get some guidance out there to say, hey, here's how you can solve your problem in the here and now. Yes, we do need the laws to change, but we got to work with what we have right now. So as I research
today.
these cases, there's, hey, look, example after example where we just put something together, step 1, step 2, step 3, a template to follow.
Yep.
To, have some recourse against, the dog bullies.
Yep. Hey, Sheepie, I think we're going to wrap this up, but you haven't had a whole lot of chance to talk this episode. I guess you're stuck with well, particularly me. I was telling Rodney earlier, what's scary is that in my family, I'm the quiet one. But anyway, I'll let you you want to wrap this up? Did you have any more thoughts on any of these issues or anything else you wanted to discuss?
There was just a couple of thoughts I had going back to just the search and rescue.
Oh, you cut out there for a second. Yeah,
I was doing.
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Is this better?
Yeah, we can hear you. It seems like every once in a while you cut out for a second or two, but
I don't know
you're
what
good.
is going on with the microphone. But nothing super substantial here. It's just I found an article earlier about search and rescue dogs in Ukraine, and it says the title is "You Can Tell by the Bark: How Ukraine's Rescue Dogs Search for Life and Death. Former canine athletes forced by war to become rescuers. A squad of dogs searches for survivors in ruined homes destroyed by rockets and for unmarked graves in Ukrainian territory." I'm just like, that's odd. Like, former canine athletes. Anyways, the thought was just, it seems like a lot of people are just using their pets and calling them search and rescue dogs depending on the circumstance. So I don't know. It's just kind of a bizarre world, I think, that deserves, like so many other things, more scrutiny.
Yep.
It definitely seems like a propaganda piece to me.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yep. Much propaganda.
Yes. Because, I mean, looking at the article translated from the original language, it's just a bunch of people. I mean, there's like a corgi. It's people's pets. They're having their dogs run through the remains and rubble of homes and stuff that were bombed. And then it shows pictures and has a lot of description of like the dogs getting injured while searching for people in this rubble. And they're like patching up the dog's paws, like, because it stepped on something. And again, it just seems like, is this actually helping, or is this just a lot of time and effort? You know what I mean? For these dogs, like doing not much of anything useful.
Yeah,
the dogs are just getting injured and needing like, first aid that could probably be reserved for people that might need it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a performative stunt.
Exactly.
So, yeah, what did Fido rescue? Well, he rescued, it was a bag of Alpo, a bunch of cat turds.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. That's all I have, but it's just definitely, it seems questionable at best.
Yeah. Well, since you're on, though, I had a thought, too. How is your dog hoarder neighbor? How's that going?
Nothing has changed. It's still the same weird comings and goings. I swear there's days where the dogs aren't here and no one seems to be there for a while, but now the dogs are all in the backyard barking, and her front porch area is like littered with what is that company people order stuff, bark.com. She's got like boxes, like UPS guys making trips to her house like every day with just giant boxes of like what I assume is like dog food and other dog related packages. She's got like a pile right now outside her garage that's taller than I am of these boxes.
Jeez.
Yeah, so no,
just
not much.
Financially self-immolating.
Yes.
For the dog.
Honestly, I mean, there's at least 10 of them that I've been, and she hosed the garage out again recently, so her driveway is like covered in shit. I would hate to be like a delivery person. Like, they don't go through enough. They got to traipse through her like shit covered driveway all
Cross
the time.
the minefield.
Disgusting. And then they go to everyone else's house. Yeah.
That might be another angle on this is, USPS, which is unionized. I don't know why their union has not said we're done delivering mail to, dog nutters. You're not getting mail if you've got a, dangerous animal on your property. I don't know what they've done up to this point. But then
That
Amazon,
has happened
right?
a few times. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll do that. Like the USPS, they'll redline a neighborhood if there's, unsecured, dangerous dogs. The problem is that doesn't address the problem, right? That the problem is that the fact is you've got a neighborhood that's been basically taken over by, a dangerous dog pack. So the solution would be in pursuing. You're right, Rodney. That kills me about the post office is that these are federal workers, and you actually have postal. They get killed sometimes, but nobody does anything about this. They're like, oh, okay, one of our federal workers got deleted. Well, I guess we'll just stop delivering to that neighborhood, which actually makes the lives of everyone else.
Yeah, can you imagine a shittier way to die than dying at work? Like, you're at work. Like, I like my job, but there's shit I'd rather be doing. And it's just like you gotta work and die. Like, I don't know.
I know, God.
Yeah, what was the name of that woman?
Sheepie, if you don't mind me asking, and if you're comfortable sharing, how do you keep your family safe in that situation? Like, what do you have to do? Because like that's kind of a practical point of like how are people negotiating these, having a dangerous animal lurking in your neighborhood. I don't want to ask too personal of a question, but the curiosity is getting the better of me. Like, how do you mitigate that threat? Because it's scary.
No, I know. I that's something I actually talked about on one of these calls. I contacted the county sheriff because she has like a pack of dogs in her backyard. And I don't know if you've listened before, but briefly, when they first moved in, I knew something bad was going to happen because the very first thing she did was have a fence company come out and construct a massive chain link fence. And I think there's a strand of electric fence inside of that too. So when I saw that fence going up, it's not a standard like 5-foot chain link fence. It's got to be like 7 feet tall. It's almost to the awning or whatever of the roof. Like, it's massive, which to me demonstrates that she on some level recognizes that she's keeping something dangerous in her yard. So she constructed this ginormous fence. Yeah, go ahead.
It's like, do you have a prison warden fetish? Like this lady, like, why is that your hobby? Like, it's not like you're making a choice to live that way. Like it's almost like if you build model railroads, right? But like she's building like model prison complexes, and
yes,
it's just, like, insane. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Tell her. They should enhance that
lights on it too.
They should enhance that with watchtowers and all that kind of stuff.
It almost looks like it because at night she put these like cute like spotlights on it, so like it's bright at night. Like on the top of the fence post or something, she's put these like, I don't know if they're solar. I'm guessing they're like solar lights, but yeah, it's lit up like a prison yard at night. So, anyways,
that's a weird cosplay.
It is very strange. Something weird's going on in that house. I'm telling you, like. So she's got the backyard full of just a variety of dogs. There's like 2 huskies, one of which doesn't bark. It literally screams. Like the first time Mr. Sheepie heard it, he didn't realize it was one of the new dogs that she got. And because it was like, oh, like it doesn't sound like a dog. It was literally, it's like this horrific screaming sound. It scares my kids. One of my kids was like, oh my God, somebody's being like murdered or something. Anyway, so there's that. And then in her garage, it's like a large garage. She erected chain link kennels. And inside of those, she keeps these pit bulls. And anyways, she always lets the pit bulls and her Great Dane, which she seems to be particularly attached to because it's always with her, like out of the fence, like just whenever she's outside, like she's got this Great Dane with her, but she lets them run around. So anyways, I called the sheriff And I was like telling them about this, and I was like, is there anything you guys can do? Like, she's letting these dangerous dogs run around. I'm scared for my safety and my family, because I have to walk all the way down to like near her house where my mailbox is to get my mail. Anyway, to make a long story short, they told me the sheriff's office has actually been trying to get the county commissioner to do something about this rural area, because they go on so many dog related calls over the years. But unfortunately, right now where I live, there's no animal control, and there is no leash law, and there isn't even like a limit on the number of dogs people are allowed to have out here. So they told me the best thing I can do is carry a gun. While, like, that's all I can do. And if the dogs come up on my property near me, I can shoot them, and there's nothing
whatever
else.
your feelings are about that, it like, you know, I'm not trying to get into like a gun argument or political stuff, but it's like, it's crazy that you have to go to your mailbox armed. Like,
Yes.
that's such a weird, like, that is not normal
No,
in
I
any
know.
way. Like,
Well, I
I
think
feel
the
like
thing
it's a
is
third world country or something.
Yeah, they're making it the new normal. That's the problem. But, you know, yeah, it is. It's like, and you know, I'm a 2A guy, but yeah, it shouldn't be like packing a rod like just to your own mailbox shouldn't be a requirement. But yeah, I guess, you know, under the existing paradigm, if that's the best you can do, then do it.
Right, which I do. But the problem is, and I said this to the sheriff, is like, I don't know how experienced animal control. I think you've done some shooting and stuff, but you know, if I'm carrying like I have like a 9mm, but there's like 5 or 6 pit bulls. Like, what are the chances? I have what, like 16 rounds if one is in the chamber or something like that.
there's a good
If
video
one of
of
them gets my hand, one of them like latches onto my arm while I'm trying to shoot another one, like, I'm going down. Like, how good of a shot do I have to be to take out like all 5 or 6 dogs with 1 or 2 shots before they get to me? You know how fast they can move?
right, you're not John Wick, and like, it's
Right.
the whole, you know, and the if practical point, I don't know how much we're allowed to recommend, and I'm not nitpicking or like, you know, second guessing anybody's decisions or offering unwarranted advice, but that's why I like pepper spray, because like if I'm panicking or whatever, like I can just blast a cloud of that shit, and it's like, you
Right.
know, I
I
mean,
feel like a machete would be better.
yeah, whether it works or not,
Chainsaw.
I hope we never have to find out. But there is a video of a Philly cop who a pack of 3 dogs was attacking somebody, and this is kind of a practical point to more so to kind of, there's always like the guy online that's like, well, you know, I carry and I, you know, blast that thing if it came near me, you know, like that dude, like we all
Yeah.
kind of, like, not being rude, but you know, the guy whose solution is always, oh well, I've got a gun. And so there's a video of a Philly police officer trying to save a man who was being attacked by a pack of 3 dogs. And, you know, there's only one dog attacking, so there's only one dog he's got to shoot, right? And it's attacking this man. And you can see it takes him 30 seconds at least to get a good, I guess you'd say, angle so that he can fire on the dog and not hit the guy the dog's attacking. I mean, it's just like people oversimplify the threat these things pose. It's not like
Yes.
you have a magical talisman, like I've got a level 4, you know, Glock or whatever that casts a spell of protection. If I just, you know, it's
Right.
like, no, there's like a practical like aspect to it where there is no good solution other than just banning these things. And, you know, I
Exactly.
mean, like, yeah.
Well,
like,
that's the other thing I worry about too with those types of self-defense solutions is that, you know, you say you successfully protect yourself, but, you know, if you send those dogs over the Rainbow Bridge, there's going to be consequences. And even though the sheriff said, oh, yeah, you can defend yourself, but you're going to have to defend yourself. And a lot of it, too, is you may not necessarily need to kill all of them. Maybe you shoot 2 and the rest of them run off, perhaps. But even if that's the case, and you escape without injury, there may be legal consequences. It sounds like there's no way that nutter owner, your nutter neighbor, is going to respect the fact that you were just trying to save your own life. They're never going to
No.
do that. Their narrative is going to be, and maybe even many other dog people in the community, is you murdered a couple of innocent fur babies.
Well, they
That's
Exactly.
going to
always
be
come out with this stupid, like, unhelpful advice of, well, you should have just yelled, or you should have just raised your hands really big to scare it off and make yourself look taller. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but I've seen dog netters try to Monday morning quarterback a lot of these situations where they're like, oh, the person overreacted. There was like a set of 10 steps that every dog trainer knows that magically shuts off a pit bull. And, you know, you should have like done the hokey pokey the right way and he would have known you weren't a threat.
yeah.
Like, you know,
Exactly.
they always have this stupid excuse and that, like, victim blame is the term I'm
Yep.
looking
The
for.
onus is always on us. Like, we're supposed to understand dog body language, and the dog was looking at you with its whale eyes from the side, so you should have known that indicates it's uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to have to major in dog behavior to exist in my society. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, yeah,
Yep.
and you know, it's great that people can, like, obviously, if a dog's a threat, you know, you got to live in the here and now and not worry about like what comes after if it's threatening your body or, you know, your children or animals or whatever. So, you know, you got to do what you got to do to survive that moment. I hate to put it that way, but that's the reality of it. And it's great that people can avail themselves of things like firearm protection stuff. You know, certainly not something I'm against at all, but it's just, it all circles back to, this is crazy that this is what you have to do in your day-to-day life. I kind of feel like I don't know, like,
Yeah.
that's
Well, the thing with that is like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's far from a perfect solution. And I actually did an episode on that because actually I was doing some adept bashing at one point, and I probably got the most downvoted comment in Reddit history because all these adepts were talking about, oh yeah, man, because that the only reason they don't like pit bulls is because pit bulls attack other dogs. So they're all out there, purchasing weapons, getting their carry permits, and yada yada yada. You're going in with all this aggressive posturing. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna put some lead in some pit bulls, man. Like, I'm packing heat, dude. I'm gonna, send them into the next life and all that kind of stuff. But one problem with that too is with the aggressive posturing is that, yeah, anything kinetic against the furry Jesus, like I was saying, is going to be taken very, very seriously, right? And you want to avoid that kind of aggressive posturing in any kind of self-defense scenario, even if it's non-lethal defense like pepper spray. It's like, hey, you know what? I was attacked and I just did what I had to do, and leave it at that. But yeah, you want to avoid the aggressive posturing. And the other problem too is like with when you have dog packs. Again, if you have a pack of half a dozen or more dogs, yeah, I mean, that's when those. I mean, if it's just one or two dogs, like, yeah, you can. If you're armed, you can defeat them. If there's 10 of them, I mean, you still have an advantage. You're much better off with a self-defense tool than you are without it, right? It's like wearing a seatbelt. But
you have at least some
yeah,
kind of rough recourse that
yeah, well,
in the
there's
whole.
you have an advantage, right? You have an advantage. But the thing is, like with these dog packs, is that they really those dog packs need to be exterminated. Okay, we're not talking about maybe one or two at-large pets. That's the kind of thing where pro action is necessary. Where,
You can hunt coyotes, like, there's no season in
oh
a lot
yeah,
of states. There's no season, there's no tag limit. Just go get it done, whatever. How many people actually get bit by coyotes in a year, right? Like, I'm just kind of weighing like the threat versus like what's allowed, what your options are. Or wild hogs. Wild
wild
hogs,
hogs,
there's
yeah,
no season limits on them. Oh, but a pack of vicious dogs. Oh, wait, let's hold up.
that's
And
a
it's like,
whole
yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, too. Sometimes I get into wild hogs, I find that interesting. But when you've got a location being essentially terrorized by a dog pack, that's where it's not just self-defense, it's self-offense. They should be
animals that are the best defense is a good offense, right? But the animals that are, the data's on our side here, like they're shown to be just infinitely almost more dangerous than a coyote. Not saying coyotes are safe, but when was the last time, are there news articles about people getting mauled to death by coyotes weekly? And wild boars, which, dangerous animal, but most are really going to do is tear your lawn up. But there might be, hey, in a lot of states, those laws are passed thanks to the farm lobby. So I think people that raise animals, even if it's like a hobby farm or whatever, there might be allyship there. Who knows?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, is you try to find allies, and it's ridiculous that coyotes and wild hogs are varminted, but these stray dog packs are not. And I'm not saying that coyotes and hogs shouldn't be varminted. I mean, hogs are, well, I mean, it's an interesting, scenario, because
it's just a compare and contrast, right? Of like how certain animals are treated versus other extremely dangerous animals that we have data that shows, like CDC, 800,000 people got bit. I think it was last year, that required medical attention. Way more got bit, but like 800,000 is the number that there was some kind of medical attention required. So,
well, that's what's reported. One thing I wanted to get into is the nature of statistics, but we'll kick that to the next call. So, but yeah, well, I think too, I mean, it's a difference, but it's an interesting point you raised, because like, why are wild hogs varminted? And well, it's a couple of things. You're right. It's these farm and ranch lobbies, plus the conservation authorities, right? And those are groups that punch pretty hard. Because I mean, I hike a lot around here, and hogs will just destroy a forest floor. They'll just wipe it out. I blogged and vlogged about that. They'll also like destroy crop. Like they'll just wipe out a cornfield. So those lobbying organizations said, we need the tools to not just defend ourselves, but actually go after them, right? So you don't have to wait for the hog to actually start tearing up your crop. He could be sleeping and you can blow him away, right? And the same kind of rules. I mean, it's a different set of implications, but the same kind of rules need to be applied to these feral dog packs. Like, you shouldn't have to wait until it's like right on top of you to delete it. They should be deleted on site, and not just, it should be, I talk about, there should be self-help tools, and authorities should go after them also, but they don't, because dogs are sacred animals. Rover is the furry Jesus, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
pretty much. And I think coyotes get blamed for a lot of things that actually are dogs.
Yep.
Like in my experience, I've never had issues with coyotes messing with my livestock. When I had chickens, it wasn't coyotes. You know what I mean? That killed like an entire 50 chickens at one time. So I think coyotes get blamed for a lot of behaviors that are actually dogs doing them.
Well, that's the other thing too, is there's always a tendency to, again, they want to protect Fido's reputation. So, or there's an incentive to do that, because, our authorities are infested with nutters, or people who at least respect the fact that dogs have a ton of social and political capital. So if a bunch of livestock gets deleted, or even a person, they're going to say, by domestic dogs, they're going to say, oh yeah, it was coyotes or some wildcat or something. And that's actually not uncommon. I've done a deep dive into those cases, because the initial report is, that it's wolves or coyotes or perhaps some wildcat, but it comes out later, they do a FOIA request on the, coroner's report. It turns out, it's a domestic dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how do you even tell, like, is there an expert out there that can just tell the difference between a coyote bite and right. Like so much gets blamed on, wild animals like coyotes. Probably mostly dogs. I think that's fair to say. I could definitely go with that. But that's crazy that you have to live that way, and I just, it's just curiosity got the better of me. And I was like, well, what do you do? Like, how do you, how does anybody, how do you mitigate the threat? Right. So that's insane.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's bad out here. People, I mean, there's a girl my daughter's age that was in her class at school that has permanently disfigured face because the neighbor's pit bull like ripped her face off when she was like a little kid. I mean, it's just so pervasive.
Horrific. Yeah.
And horrific. Yeah, it's so common, but it's like people don't seem to catch on like how much this is going on.
Yeah, it's just a broader symptom of it. I mean, to me, it is like watching the Colosseum burn, I guess, or whatever, because it's such a civilizational like decline. It's like, what is the point of all this if we can't like enact reasonable restrictions that would, protect a child over something that is essentially a luxury? Like, the right to own a pet is not in the Constitution. Okay. Like, we can tell people, no, you can't have a dog. Like, that's okay to do when, we've got this giant crisis point where, and it's always the most vulnerable people, right? Elderly, pregnant women, children are, dying. It's in a very graphic, horrible fact. They're being eaten by monsters. I mean,
Yes.
what is the point of calling, like how far have we declined that we can't, deal with the monster in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, these are many of these situations are literal. I mean, indeed, horror movie scenarios. Even the case I brought up on the screen here was, what happened was this postal worker was driving through a rural area and the mail truck broke down and she was subsequently mauled to death by, a pack of dogs. I believe they were, I think, 5 large dogs. I believe at least some of them were pits or pit mixes. But how often is that trope repeated in popular horror fiction? Right? You take even like Cujo, by Stephen King. It's almost an iconic novel. But that was a plot device of that story where a mother and her young son were trapped in a broken down car by a rabid Saint Bernard. But you literally have that same situation here, that same horror movie trope. And it's almost like a really bad horror movie. I mean, where sometimes you watch these cheesy horror movies and they're like, oh, let's split up. It's like, no, dummies, you're safer in a group, but you see these things play out over and over. There was another case I want to just talk about real quick. I think it was in Alabama where a woman was torn up by a pack of dogs, right? Goes to the hospital in critical condition. So it was the response of authorities. Right. They sent I guess a health department worker was sent an unarmed person alone to go investigate. What happens? She is subsequently mauled to death. And you're thinking, like, if that were in a movie, you'd be like, that would never happen. That's the stupidest thing ever. It's like, no, that's exactly what happened. Or thinking, let's send an unarmed person alone to go check it out. I mean, even like cartoons are more like less stupid than that, but that's what was done. Yeah, it seems that there's just an inability to take the threat posed here seriously.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like we've got to hear out the dog nutter BS about how, well, we can't deal with a pack of wild pit bulls running through your neighborhood because sometimes dogs help with search and rescue.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like the whole argument.
Yeah, that's right. So
That's it. That's the only thing they have on their side.
Yeah.
And that's why I call it wickedness, because it's like, if you're making that argument in your brain, that you're advocating for a situation where people are getting hurt in grotesque fashion that's just like horror movie level and worse by an animal that is the archetypical monster. Like your caveman brain just looks at that thing and knows, like, I'm gonna stay away from this. This looks like a tiger or something. You know, like it's a
Yes.
gargoyle. Like that's
You wouldn't
like,
think it was a nanny dog. I find that surprising.
yeah, right, exactly. So it's like these people are advocating for that situation, like knowingly. You can't claim ignorance. It's not like you're just so like bent on something that you will totally sidestep all the human suffering just for because you're quote unquote identify as a dog person. Like, you know,
Yeah.
come on, give me a break. That's why we can't
Yeah.
argue with these people. They just have to face consequences.
Yeah.
My very final thought then is for the organization, maybe the Thomas Jefferson Center for Total Dog Death. No.
Yeah.
Hey, actually, that's not bad. I mean, Thomas Jefferson, yeah, you know, actually throwing him in there would, yeah, the Jeffersonian Society for Removal of Mutts. Yeah.
Well, but yeah, well, the Ariel guy made a point that like it's not so much we're against stuff, it's just we're for common decency.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson Center for Sane Dog Control, or I don't know, something, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
like just it all fits in the same bucket of like, you know, don't blast loud music at 3 a.m. Like, why are we having to go behind adults and even have this conversation with them? You
Right.
know, like they should be locked in the public square in a stockade so we can throw tomatoes at them for being that stupid. Like, no,
Yeah.
how are you that stupid? Like there's a, you know, there's a reason they used to exile people to islands. It's because their stupidity was so terrible it was physically dangerous to be around them.
yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. All right. Hey, guys, I think I'm going to wrap this up because we're past 2 hours, but it's been another great call. I look forward to having you both again. You know, there's still some more topics. We can cover that the next time. Maybe we'll also be communicating in the background because I'd like to move forward with standing up this organization. And again, the folks who maybe didn't tune in initially was, you know, anyone willing to contribute some resources, time, money, effort towards standing up this organization, let me know. Another thing that's been bounced around, Ariel brought it up, was creating a documentary sort of outlining the problem. I was thinking of doing something myself because, you know, in YouTube channels where when somebody goes to your channel, like it's an intro video will just start playing automatically. I was thinking of doing something, you know, it's maybe 5 minutes long, outlining the problem. Actually, I was going to call it structural injustice because that's what this is. You know, it's fundamentally unjust that, you know, you got to, what you have is a category of pet owner that can just do whatever they want. Right, that's really the problem, and you know that's what needs to change. Of course, you know, go into the different aspects of it, but I think it's something that's a lot of people, particularly Americans, really wound up because you have, yeah, like I said, it's fundamentally unjust, this whole scenario. So, but maybe we could do some longer ones also. I think, you know, Kanon would be a good candidate to work on the production of such a thing. Not that I'm trying to give him work. He and I have collaborated before. Maybe we could work on that together. Just a few thoughts before closing. So, in any case, again, thanks for joining. I'm going to wrap it up. This is Animal on Control. And as always, people first. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep.